Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sheree Hill. I am the creative director at Media Current. I am so glad to see all of you today. We're going to talk about UI and UX design, specifically persuasive patterns in choice architecture. And we'll get into what all of that means in a little bit. So I am with Media Current. Media Current is a full-service digital agency that implements world-class open source software development, strategy, and design to achieve defined goals for enterprise organizations seeking a better return on investment. So a little bit about me. I've been in this industry for about 15 years. Historically, I've been in branded entertainment. Right now with Media Current, we are working in higher education and nonprofit in the Drupal space, developing content management systems. Right now, we're looking at what happens in those boxes, and that's what I really want to talk to you guys about today, about engagement and about reaching our users using human-centered design. Okay. So what is choice architecture? Choice architecture is really about designing options in a way that leads users towards desired behaviors without limiting choice. This is something that we encounter every day. I'm sure most of you have been in one of these stores. Choice architects really look at how are the floors laid out? How do we put products so that users can interact with them? How do we reach users and cause engagement? If you look on the walls, you can see there are displays that have different visual ads. There are pictures that people can identify with. There's vivid colors, imagery, typography. Some stores use scent. When you walk into a store, a smell can draw you in. Starbucks does this. We find that many times our sense of smell is stronger than our sense of sight. And it can cause a stronger reaction in us so that we have more of a memorable experience just by smelling coffee walking by a store. So what is UX design? I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with what it is, but it's really centered in our behavior. By understanding our wants and our needs, we create a tailored experience that speaks to fundamental human needs, ultimately leading to a predictable path of decision. So one thing we're going to examine in a little while is what are our needs and how does that relate to how we experience the world? So let's think about our choices. I don't know about you guys, but me, sometimes I make decisions and I regret them. Or I wonder, why did I do that again? It seems although sometimes I am driven by an automatic pilot that I do not know how to control, even as hard as I try to. Well, there's something about that, and it's about the power of persuasion. This is something marketers understand very well. And it's that our choices are pervasively influenced by elements selected by choice architects. Now, these tactics are not new. They've been around for ages. Aristotle's Rhetoric was written over 2,000 years ago, and it's one of the earliest documents written about persuasion. There are different modes of persuasion. I'm sure many of you are familiar with some of these. There is logos, which is really centered in logic. This happens in arguments when people use position statements. There is ethos, which is credibility. This is something that we're doing today. Authority, we follow people that have an understanding of their practice. And then there's pathos, empathy. This is something that we hear so much about today, is really understanding where our users are so that we can design for them. So I'm going to discuss a little bit about biases. There's different biases, and some of our speakers have touched on these today. Cognitive biases, which are limitations in objective thinking that is caused by the tendency for the human brain to perceive information through a filter of personal experience and preferences. What this means is that I'm going to see something differently than you are, and you're going to see something differently than she is. And that's because we have different experiences that create our personal lenses. Social biases are conscious or unconscious expressions of prejudicial attitudes towards a particular social grouping. Again, this has to come to where do we come from, how were we raised, what environments did we experience when we were in a younger age, and this is the adage of we are products of our environment. So we're going to look at one of these biases, which has to do with authority, and that's that we have a strong tendency to comply with authority figures. Well, who are our authority figures today? As adults, we all look to different places. Maybe if you walk into a grocery store and you're standing in line, you might see someone like this. This is an example of social bias as well. Brands understand this well. They understand that people identify with the personalities of people that we encounter in media. Brands understand that brands have their own personality, and they will use influencers in order to elevate and to amplify their brand. This is also called celebrity amplification. It's used oftentimes in campaigns and to help raise awarenesses for brand. Another bias is positive mimicry, and that's that we learn by comparing our behaviors with the behaviors of others. This is what happens when you meet someone and they smile, and you smile back just like that. This is something that we learned at a very early age. Sometimes we think that we try to copy everyone, and that's because our emotions are a language that we learn through the lens of experience. Everyone knows this when you're with a baby and you look and smile at the baby is actually learning emotion. They are capturing their emotion from another person, and this is how we reflect in one another. Now, this is something that brands understand. It's used in product positioning and product placement. You can see the woman's face of rapture and enjoyment. I know by looking at this image that I want to feel like that. I can remember what it feels like to drink that soda and have that look on my face. And this is how we express through emotional design. Past just the look of the feeling, we also see what's called lifestyle imagery. Oftentimes we see situations that we want to encounter, we want to feel too, and this is through bonding and social bonding. We can see the woman is happy, there's an attractive man next to her, they're both having a soda. I want to be there, I want to feel that, I want a Coca-Cola. Another way that marketers use to connect with their users is through storytelling. And what that does is it engages a user in a perspective with a narrative that invokes the imagination. And I'm going to present you guys with something that showed us at Christmas time how this happens. If you remember what Ralphie, he loved the story of his little compass that could tell him the mystery. And at the end, he found out it was an ad. This is what marketers use to connect with us. And it's not only done through storytelling in this nature, but it's also used in user journeys. We set up a story that leads to closure, and that leads us to continue down the journey, which would lead to a conversion path. And let's talk a little bit about framing. So framing is used in that we tend to avoid risk when a positive frame is presented, but we seek risk when a negative frame is presented. And I'm going to show you guys an example of that. So I'm sure if you look at these images, we can relate with pain. This is something that drug companies, there's some drug companies that have used this where we can see an image and we think that this is something that we don't want to risk. This is something we want to solve for. So a negative frame is used in order to present a solution to market a brand. Framing has to do with our perception and our comprehension, and it's how we show narratives in other ways. I'm going to talk a little bit about the cocktail party effect. And what this is have you guys ever been to a party and there's so much noise, even today, there's so much noise and buzz going on, and you hear your name? It's the strangest thing, even though there's all this hum. Or maybe when you're a kid, right? You hear like the murmuring of your parents talking, and you can hear your name, and all of a sudden you pick up and you laser in on the conversation. That's part of our bias. And that's the phenomenon that the brain's ability to focus one's auditory attention, which is an effect of selective attention in the brain on particular stimuli, while filtering out a range of other stimuli, such as when a partygoer can focus on a single conversation in a noisy room. Now, as UX and UI designers, we can use this bias in personalization, and that's in creating a personalized experience by tailoring it to the needs and using a profile of the user. I'm going to show you guys an example how we did this with USC libraries. What this is it is a dashboard. I'm going to show you a closer view of this. What we did is we used the personas that were developed for the USC libraries, and we created a personalized experience for them. There is an authenticated user nav toolbar which provides quick access to dashboard and the ability to customize the dashboard with settings, manage lists, view checkouts, and room reservations. There's also a helpful messaging area, and that allows USC libraries to welcome guests and provide general instructions. Right now there's a trend in higher education to have custom alerts appear on the homepage, and this gives the institution the ability to send targeted messages to the specific user on a dashboard. We have the My Research tiles. I have a friend right now that was a PhD student at Emory, and he was telling me how difficult it was to find relevant and recent content in some of his research at different libraries that he went to all over the nation. And showing this information of how that information is delivered in a personalized list with recent content really made the research easier. And then there's Discover tiles, and that's a personalized list of related recommendation content, also with customizable displays and capabilities. That also goes back to authority. So one of the things that we see sometimes in Netflix, right? There's recommendations, or in music sites, iTunes, there's recommended albums. A lot of times as humans, we follow other humans. When we see something as popular, it's something that is a trend, and that trend becomes an influence, and we as humans will follow that trend and that influence. So here is another view of a wireframe of the research area. You can see there's lists, an area for pinning up material, recently viewed, and bookmarks. So we're going to go back to some basic psychology, talk a little bit about Maslow. Many of you are probably familiar with this. But looking at what our needs are. And when we look at human-centered design and user-centered design, we want to really understand what people need so we can meet those needs at point of interaction. So that starts off with our physiological needs, which is really our life force. This is air, water, food, and rest. One of my coaches told me that sleep is emotional energy. So next time someone tells you that you don't need a nap, just remind them that it is one of your basic needs. Safety, this has to do with our security, our stability. This has to do with our finances, understanding that we have security within our accounts, our health, protection from elements, even clothing. We can see different types of clothing when the weather is cold, and that can meet a security and safety need for us. Love and belonging, this has to do with community, with friends, family, intimacy, relationships, and really that sense of belonging. And we'll take a look at how we can address this within image selection. Esteem, moving up the pyramid, we see that dignity and independence is important. That has to do with our status, recognition, education, achievements, mastery, and prestige. And then the top level of self-actualization, this is really being aware. And this is where we have creativity, spontaneity, traveling, and self-growth. So how does this apply in web design? This is something that you can see in higher education, where you can see what a ranking is for a different institution. You can see that prestige within an institution. You can see one of our clients here that we work with has this wonderful image in one of their print documents, and I want to show you how we are meeting different needs within one photograph. You've heard that a photograph is worth 1,000 words. And it truly is, because it speaks to us beyond language. It speaks to us in those emotional language and within our needs. So one of the things about being humans is that we are cyclical. We are on a rock that spins. We live in cycles. Women are based on cycles. The seasons are in cycles. And this is something that subconsciously we recognize. In images like this, we know that fall is representative of change. We understand that that is representative of enrollment, of new beginnings. And so this imagery, when we're talking about university, is indicative of what this is celebrating. If we're looking at esteem, we can look at buildings. We can look at the prestige of architecture. Oftentimes, higher institutes that we work with content management systems have these beautiful campuses. when we present those campuses in light with all of these other elements, it really lends credibility to the institution. And we'll talk about brand impression, which is authority. You can see right at the center of this image, we have two people together, which is that sense of intimacy and belonging. And front and center, right over his heart, is the brand of the institution. So this image in itself meets so many different needs within us as individuals of a perspective that it would be looking at. Again, let's talk about periodic events, which I just touched on. So as I said, we are creatures of habit, and this is something that marketers understand. So again, being Drupal developers, being web developers, back-end developers, front-end developers, we really focus on the framework. And what I want to bring to light today is really what happens within that framework. What does campaign look like? How do marketers look to reach their target users? Because we can build the best platform in the entire universe, and if we don't understand what we were trying to communicate, it can become a failure. So how do we do that? We look at planning seasonal events. This is a media chart for Chevrolet, and you can see that it's cyclical. They have different types of campaigns that run in different experiences. So there's offline experiences, there's web experience, there's broadcast experience, there's radio experiences. So we're being reached through all of our different senses in different places. And as developers and as designers, I would challenge you to really think about what occurs within the design that you're working on. What is it that we are trying to say to our end user? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about choice overload. And this is something that we really see as a challenge as UX designers. Behavioral economists have shown that in some instances, presenting consumers with many choices can lead to reduced motivation to make a decision and decrease satisfaction with the choices they end up making. Okay, I'm going to give you a real life example. Have you been to a restaurant where there are a million things on the menu and you don't know what to pick, right? Or even better, you pick something and your boyfriend, husband, girlfriend, wife, child pick something else and it was better than yours. Why? Why is it like that? This is something that's so fascinating. Have you stood in this place? Have you stood in this place and there are so many things that nothing looks good? It's overwhelming. And that's because this is a bias that as humans we carry. So what we look at is limited choice. And that's that we are more likely to make a decision when there are fewer options. I'm just going to give you a simple example. You have 3 chairs. They look the same, but one is in the foreground and it's larger and there is white space. If we think about Apple, why does Apple work? Apple works because they are eliminating a lot of the noise. We need to be able to get clear signals within our mind. So as designers and as developers, we want to think about that when we present products, when we present messages. We want a clear path of information to our user. There is a great responsibility with this information. And that's that we want to have the user's best interests in mind. Because it is influence. It does cause influence. But what this does is it allows us to market specific products at specific times. So if you're dealing with an e-commerce site. In fact, I just saw this happen in the other room when we were sitting giving prizes away. Do you remember the gentleman, they were giving out 3 prizes. There were 2 blue duffel bags and there was 1 red one. And the gentleman went up and he picked the red duffel bag. Why? There's another bias that's related to that, and that bias is that we see value when there is less of something and more of others. We want what is rare. We want treasure. We want value, and that's how we examine and that's how we evaluate it, is when we see less of something, we want to keep it for ourselves. So in design, we can create decisions by creating something that is a different color than something else. Putting it front and center, a user will be drawn to that. Putting it in focal point, the user will be drawn to that. These are the different elements of choice architecture and of UX. So we're going to talk about bento box. How many of you guys do any sort of search design or development? Okay, all right. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but really we're looking at that idea of how information is processed more efficiently and easier when it is delivered in smaller snippets. One of the things we want to think about when we design is designing for comfort. Designing in a way that is not only an immersive and memorable experience, but it's less painful. I have sat in front of the computer for so long, like it feels like something comes and sits on me. Like it becomes uncomfortable, we get in that pain. I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but sometimes when you go to a website and it is so clear and so easy to get exactly what you need, that becomes a pleasurable experience. One of the challenges that students face really is obtaining the information that they need in a way that's easy to see. So when we designed the bento box for USC libraries, we looked at having in-page navigation that helps users list through category listings up here at the top. We have the category tiles, which allows users to see search results across multiple databases. One of the challenges that USC faced is that they had so many different databases. And I'm sure many of you may have faced challenges like this when we're looking at migration. So being able to serve up different databases within different tiles and have them related to different categories really allows for ease of use. Looking at filtering, really allowing the user to guide that experience through filters, tooltips, quick info, and item tools. This is this area here. And I'm sorry for the rasterization, but I'd be happy to provide you guys with this after as well if you're interested. It's additional functionality for the tiles. And that really allows the search results on the page as a better discovery tool and to integrate the bookmarking system, which allows authenticated users to save items, searches, and settings. Okay, oh, so here's a close review of it. You can see, so we have the books and the media, the different articles, so there are different tiles in this wire. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about value attribution. And that's that we tend to attribute the value, goodness, or authenticity of something to its context rather than the thing itself. And I have to be honest with you, I fell prey to this for so long. These are the little symbols that we see on women's bags that we consider to be valuable. These are the symbols that we see on vehicles that we're drawn to. These are the symbols that we see on clothing that put people on different social groupings. And that's really where we see different types of value. And it's a psychosensory principle that brands understand in brand building. So I'm going to take us out of the web world and into the world of fashion and show you a bit of context. We have two different bag lines here. The first bag line runs from price tag of $250 to $350. This, you can find this in any department store. Up here, we have bags that cost an upward of $3,000. Why? They are the same product. It is the same material. It is the same metal. It is the same design and shape. Why is it that we find more value in one over another? Yes?
It's the brand name. There's value in a Gucci bag versus some bag you found in the department store.
Yes, thank you. It's another way of, that they say it is brand equity. So we look at what the equity is. There's an investment from those brands in the celebrities that were amplifiers that we discussed before. So if we look at someone like Jennifer Aniston that might be supporting one of these brands like Gucci, then people will see her authority as bringing value to this bag. It's something that is quite curious to me. And it's something that sometimes we don't see value in things that are around us. And so I want to show you guys this. If I can get it to play. So this is Joshua Bell. And the New York Times did this experiment. He's world renowned in his practice, and they put him in a New York City train station to see if anyone would pay attention. His music's beautiful, but you can see because of where he is, people don't really pay attention. And what I would challenge you to do is really, when you are walking around today, open your eyes to the world. Because there really is treasure everywhere, and oftentimes our lenses keep us from seeing things of great value because we have such history in our beliefs. So I would challenge you today to challenge your own beliefs, to look around and see value in the most unlikely places. So thank you guys for your time. And do you guys have any questions? I would love to talk about this. If you have any questions or experience or yes.
So, what are your impressions or opinions about the UX of, say, Amazon.com? Like, because you talk about limiting choice, organization, that sort of kind of disproves the rule on like a lot of things, right? It's just a freaking mess.
Well, I think,
but it's also the biggest retailer in the world.
yeah, but I think that's a lot of data, right? There's a different model between displaying a little bit of information versus displaying a lot of information. And there's a lot to be said about how Amazon, they spend a lot of money doing their front end design. Whether we think it's a mess or not, I still go in there and spend money more often than I should in Amazon because they are surfacing probably what I need, putting it in front of me, finding my interests, you know, like the things that you're talking about, those, you know, the relatability, you know, your previous searches, all that kind of stuff. That's all played in. There's a lot of really complex AI algorithms there that are helping break some of these core design philosophies that have been around for a while. They have a lot of information to present, and so they're using newer tools and newer methods to do that. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, this is like that's awesome. Thank you. Like I want this to be a conversation because there's so much knowledge in this room, and like really, I would rather facilitate and have engagement. So,
sorry, I didn't hear it.
No.
Well, I thought you finished.
Yes.
No, go for it.
On about the Amazon. Just today, I was on there looking at stuff, and 99.9% of the time, I don't know if I'm typical, but even with all that stuff that's out there. You know, click on this, click on that, your history, whatever. I would say the vast majority of people probably start with that one search bar. It's kind of like, I'm looking for XYZ, and they might, in my case, I tend to go to the Kindle store because I move so much, I'm tired of lugging books around, so I go to Kindle first. But yeah, I start with the search bar. I'm almost to the exclusion of everything else. I mean, I see previous search histories, but I hardly ever look at it. I go straight to the search bar.
And Amazon's homepage might as well look like the Google homepage. You know, that's pretty much how I use it.
See, I've given up on their search bar. I just use Google, and it takes me to the Amazon.
Right.
To me, it's like, okay, I search for something, and it's like, okay, here are 5,000 of what you asked for in 20 different departments. You know, I can't. So forget it. I'll go to Google, and whatever comes up in the Google search, which is usually the Amazon product that I really wanted.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So just to we're going to keep going on this Amazon
Yeah.
model, there's so many things to look at. Like that one slide that you had where it was the guy standing in front of the case, it looked like a convenience store case.
Yes.
A million different types of
Yes.
energy drinks or something like that. In that particular scenario, everything is flat. There's no drink, no option is jumping out at him and saying like, I'm the only one left, or this one has 5-star reviews, this one has 0 reviews. When you're looking at Amazon, there's a giant list full of 100 different types of headphones, for example.
Right.
But they're really, really good. Like you're saying, these algorithms are using these other techniques that you mentioned. Like scarcity, for example. How many times have you seen one that says, only 3 left in stock?
Yes.
That's that same thing with the blue and the red bags.
Yes.
There's fewer of them. I have to get one before they're gone.
Yes.
And when you really start paying attention to that in commercials,
Uh-huh.
while supplies last,
Yes.
get it soon before
Yes.
they're gone. I have to go buy a Toyota right now. They're going to be gone soon. Like, no,
Yes.
you need a car.
Yeah.
Or a timer saying you have 5 minutes to finish.
Oh, the countdown timer.
The countdown.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
come back and they're still at 24 hours.
Right. Yeah.
So all of those little techniques are being employed in sort of micro doses throughout all
right.
of those items on the page. So they get away from that overload of options by hitting you with all those other little techniques all at once. That's the way I see it, at least.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of the other side of that is also like decision fatigue. So after a certain amount of time, it's like, I am done looking at options. I'm getting this.
But if you actually
Right, so what's right,
now,
what's
if you
right in
actually
front of you at
notice-
the end of that decision making
If you
process?
notice if you're on Amazon for a period of time, you'll actually start to notice the style sheet changing. You don't realize it's happening. The fonts will start getting bigger, the white spacing will start getting bigger. If you've been shopping for something for a little bit, the actual display mode changes.
I didn't
Really?
know that.
Wow.
Yeah, he's right. That's another bias. Is that we want to give our users their decisions up close or sooner than later because we do get fatigued.
I had a question too. Like, is there a number of options that is like the optimal number of options to give a user to say like that they wouldn't,
Well, the gentlemen are saying 5. We usually present 3 to 5 in a carousel.
Well, there's actually some studies that say that like if you're given more than 5 options, because it has something to do with the neurology and the way it's connected to your brain, you actually will start to start the process of decision fatigue. And so 5 is something that's very natural and for you to kind of consume with less barrier, less decision. It's really interesting. There was a study a number of years back that came out on this very topic, and they're trying to figure out like what is it? Is it odd numbers, is it even numbers, whatever it is, and 5 kind of came back to being the most optimal thing. If you think about it, if you have like a nav bar and you have 5 major categories versus 6, it feels odd, it feels different, right? And if you have 4, it kind of feels weird as well, but for some reason 5 is the most natural for humans. So.
There's actually a book I just saw. It's about the mathematics of 5.
Right.
So there's something. So there's like.
They think it's
logic
directly related to this. It's
and-
connected to your brain, where your brain.
But there's a 3 theory also.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are theories, right?
Okay.
There's theory.
1, 3, 5, 11.
The 3 theory is basically people make choices. If it's $295, it's affordable, but if it's $305, I'll forget about it.
Right.
Although they do have a positive way of making you jump that hoop. Or 2 of them. One of them is, let's say if I'm looking at, like yesterday I was looking at a book on learning biblical Hebrew. And so I was looking at it, and then down the bottom it says, oh yeah, there's also a companion book workbook.
Yeah.
You can get these 2 for a combined price.
Yes.
Oh, so I saved money in this book.
You spent more.
Right.
Or, especially now with Christmas coming up, would you like this by tomorrow or such and such day? Order within 12 or 13 hours, 20 minutes, and we'll send it. Or if you've ordered a certain amount of dollars worth of merchandise, we'll give you free shipping. All those little positive inducements, if you will, that make you feel like, okay, yeah, I'm saving money. When are you really? I don't know. You might do the $305 versus $295 if you get free shipping. I don't know.
Yeah. Yes.
So we as humans also, we actively seek surplus. And so that's the basis of society. We only have society because we have a surplus of food and built civilization from there. And so whenever there's a deal, 2 for 1, we go after it because we actively seek surplus.
Yes. And to your point of what you were saying, so a lot of this is coming out of some studies I read of behavioral economists, and that's what they study. They look at the way that we do, there's pricing structure and how we choose within pricing structure. So it's fascinating. Yes?
So in general for products, a lot of time we put more focus on the utility aspect or functionality aspect, but there are also like social and emotional aspects.
Yes.
Like you talked about the difference between 2 handbags.
Yes.
There is a lot of emotional difference between them.
Yes.
So a lot of times, if you put more emphasis or ask the users why they are hiring a particular product, maybe they have some social and emotional needs they are getting out of that product, or they are not hiring a product, getting something else or getting by because they have unmet needs. So you have those deeper discussions with the customers, not like what do they want, what feature they want, but why they are using something or not using something. That might give some interesting parts of our product.
You bring up a very interesting point, and that's really the power of the question. We have access to anything today. Really, the information is overwhelming. And really, what I practice today is listening to questions There's so much power in questions, specifically when you're getting to know someone, and to read them, not just to listen with your ears, but also listen with your eyes and find out what their needs are, because a lot of times people will tell you what they need with their hands, with their eyes, with their shoulders, with the way that they stand. So really paying attention, and that's kind of the disconnect between the material world and the digital world, is that we are missing this. We're missing the spirit, we're missing the body. And because we're missing that, we are not connecting on that deep level. So when we interview our stakeholders, when we interview our clients, when we listen to our companions, we encourage you to really look at them, read them, understand them. It's really through understanding that we connect with them.
I wonder if you just talk a little bit about how you take these concepts of, we've talked a lot about marketing and how that's influencing, like purchasing and things. But as you mentioned a few slides, building a website, how do you take that UI and that UX experience when you're working with a new client? How do you bring that sort of collaboration to the table? How do you work with the client to pick those out and take that knowledge into your approach to the product?
Okay, that's a very good question, and really it depends on the client. It depends on what the goals and objectives are. So if it's something like a migration, then we'll look at where they are today and taking those features and those components and utilizing these tools in order to help increase them. If that's something in color treatment, if that's something in hierarchy, if that's something in where we put something in perspective, it looks at like how we're going to organize and architect this in a way that it's easier to process. Really, we're working today about creating more of a conversation around brand and making brand really the owner of what we do, because that really informs all of our design. So when we understand who we're talking to and what kind of personality we want to present, we can really understand how to communicate to our audience or our personas. So we can do that through heroes. If we understand what the users identify with, we can do specific image selection like the one that we looked at previously to communicate at that point of impact. Or if it's a landing page. Something that we just did with one of our clients is how can we divide up a hero area to have two different messages with an image? Really using that real estate. Like how are we trying to solve? We're trying to talk to multiple personas because we have a brand that has 6 sub-brands. Well, how do we talk to everyone at the same time? We know that there's a disconnect with carousels. Well, what if we divided that real estate up and had different multiple images up in this area, and then we could use brand elements to divide that up. So really using all of those different elements to communicate these ideas. Yes?
Actually, on the topic of personalities, there's this theory that I've been working on with behavioral economics where is everyone familiar with Myers-Briggs personality types? So the fact is there's 16 different personality types, which if you can basically kind of terrible words, that's the problem. If you could categorize them and sort of profile your users and your customers and present them, the kind of market to them based off the ideas, the decision making that each of those different distinct personality types make, then I feel like that would be kind of a very effective way of using marketing and advertising.
Yeah, that's like personification, right? Like when we're defining personas. What are your thoughts and takes, kind of tangentially to this? Like when defining personas for a project, like we're a product company, so it's one thing to develop personas for a university that has kind of, I would almost call it a one-directional experience with the end user, right? You're getting a message and it's going out. We're creating a product, we're helping our customers create messages for their customers, right? And so we in effect have to kind of high-level template this process and then define personas. Can you speak to, I guess maybe different types of persona classifications that you guys might use, or like what's your approach to defining personas?
Okay. So I'll talk about our brand.
Okay.
That's a little easier.
Sure.
So with our brand, we have buyers.
Right.
Right. And then we have talent acquisition. Mm-hmm. So if we're looking at speaking to a C-suite, that's going to be completely different than speaking to this room. So really understanding like what are the challenges that a C-suite is going to face today. What brands do they identify with? We know what their income level is, and if we think about a lot of their motivators, we're going to understand kind of the context of the language that they speak. versus this room. I mean, we look at this room, it's so eclectic. I mean, you guys are awesome. Like all the different colors and the different vibrancies and the vibrations in this room, it's energetic, right? It's much different than walking into a boardroom. There's a different energy level walking into a boardroom, and they're both exciting and they're wonderful, but they're different. So understanding that, we can start like drawing and building mood boards. And so this is something that we do, like we use Envision, and Envision has a great collaboration tool that we can just start placing images on. And one of the things that we do at Media Current is we do a brand exercise where we put up pictures all over our room, all different kinds of pictures, cars, watches, houses, personalities. And then we would have the brand walk in and put red tickers on something that isn't them and green tickers on something that is them. And then that opens up the conversation. What is it that makes a brand speak to somebody? So bringing those different stakeholders in, bringing someone that is a buyer, bringing someone in that's a developer, so bringing someone that's a designer, we can start seeing the context of their language. And we understand that everyone is different, but our vibrations are very similar if we look at social groupings. And that's because we have a commonality. And it's kind of like that law of attraction thing. You know, we have commonalities in what we're passionate about. Yes?
While personas are useful, I've heard the research about that personas actually can be very misleading. And a lot of time, you know, instead of focusing on the persona, if you focus more on what the job the customer is trying to do, you actually find more actionable things that actually leads to results. There's one example I heard, you know, where, you know, one company was trying to see like how they can increase their milkshakes. So they did study on their milkshake, shop. They sell milkshakes in Walmart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they are doing studies around like is it some particular demographic? Is it young or adult, old or what it is? But they didn't find any link. So it's just their usage patterns are across the board. Everybody kind of uses that. They ask question, what do you want? Do you want different flavors? Do you want bigger size? And the answers were all over the map. But then they really talked to the customers, and they found the common pattern is they have a long commute. They go from New Jersey to New York, and in the long commute, they are driving, and they want something like that's not sticky, like the donut would be sticky, or they want something where they can hold their steering on one hand, but they can still have the milkshake and sip. So they understood really what the job the customer is trying to do. Then they understood like how they can make it better.
Yeah, there was actually a really good presentation at Bad Camp a couple of weeks ago on choosing a design system. And one of the key takeaways I got there is very similar to what you're saying, is that when we're personifying things, is to try to strip out as much of the bias as possible. Strip out the sex, strip out the this age demographic, and really focus on function. Like, what is the what are these types of people? So like in our case, a lot of times in Drupal, right, we have a site builder, we have a content editor, we might have legal team, we might have all these different types of roles that are in the system. And it's really a matter of their function, not so much their particular, visible or assumed biases about them, right? You don't want to create the women between 25 and 45 age group and men, like those are not persona classifications. Even though you might have male and female, there is a Venn diagram overlap in those personas that's what we should be focusing on. What is the actual function of that persona? And I think you're right. That's kind of the moving trend is moving towards that.
And that speaks to the minimalism of the Apple. Like Apple doesn't try to have all kinds of options. They're trying to minimize to really create value where you get exactly what that job requires you to have. So.
Interesting. Yes. Good stuff. Anyone else? This has been such a great conversation. Thank you guys for your time.